Everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 6 of Hazbin Hotel. Finishing up the season. I just watched episode 5 last week, and it was really great. I almost wish I had watched it around Father's Day, because I think it would have been much better and appropriate for Father's Day, especially since we got to meet Charlie's dad, and then Alistair was vying for who's the better father of the two. I really like the relationship between Alistair and Lucifer in this, because they're both kind of like Lucifer is very visibly dysfunctional, dealing with a lot. Alistair tries to play it so cool, like nothing is wrong, but Husker kind of points out that there may be some cracks beneath the surface, which I find interesting, because Alistair has seemed quite untouchable this entire series. So the fact that Husker believes that there's some weakness there and Alistair's like, no, there's not, points out that there is possibly something underneath the surface, which is intriguing to say the least. So we still don't know where Lilith is. I have my theories. I think that Lilith, she split from Lucifer, and Lucifer is very adamant about Charlie not really meeting with heaven. He's like, no, you don't need to go up there. I wonder if Lilith has has split up with Lucifer and is with Adam. Adam seems like the type that he would have multiple women in a relationship, or if she's in heaven, like working undercover, kind of as a double agent, and it's all part of their plan. I don't know. I have a feeling it would not surprise me if we saw Lilith up there, because we've not seen her in hell and we don't know where she's at. She's not on Earth with the humans that we don't think, so that seems like the next logical place to be. And then Vaggie seems like she's going with Charlie, and I think Vaggie's a former angel, so everything seems like it's going to come out of the woodwork, and we only have 3 episodes left of season 1, so that's interesting. Do I think everything's going to get resolved? No. I think that they're going to go up there and make things worse, and possibly get the angels to come down sooner than the 6 months, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, right? So I'm pretty excited to see how that all goes down. But with that being said, I can't believe we have only 3 episodes left of season 1. And I'm excited to see what we get. And to see if maybe, I don't know if the hotel will get any, if there's any resolution with the hotel for season 1. It would be neat to know if, the angels, here's my thing. If the angels are coming down, they're like, well, you're not doing anything to help people, get cleaned up and ready to go to heaven. It would be cool if Charlie was able to show progress with the hotel and be like, but we are. And that's maybe a resolution of season 1, is that they show progress, that somebody's doing okay. And then the angels kind of hold off or go back to their every year instead of every 6 months. Instead of receding the timeline, they're like, fine, we'll take it back to the way it once was. And they're like, yay, back to status quo. That would seem in line with the humor in this show, but I don't know. I don't know what we're going to get. I don't know if Angel Dust will be the one to show progress, or they've had the most attention so far in the series, so that would make sense, but we'll see. So, or maybe Alistair, I don't know. But in any case, I'm really excited to dive in and see what we get with this episode and see what all they give us. So we're going to start Hazbin Hotel episode 6, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, I think things went from bad to worse. Maybe, possibly. I also realized I did not put subtitles on that episode, so I apologize. I'm sure somebody in the comments will be like, why doesn't the thing have subtitles? I'm so sorry. That's my mistake. I'll make sure for episodes 7 and 8 that there are subtitles. I'm not used to subtitles when it's English, so I was like, oh yeah, crud, I need to put those on there. So you'll just have to bear with me for this episode. I apologize that there aren't subtitles. But we'll just have to cross that bridge for episodes 7 and 8. Oh, well, we pretty much set up episodes 7 and 8, pretty well. Whereas now we have all these unresolved conflicts. We're gonna have Charlie with Vaggie, the knowledge. We'll talk about that whole incident, but now we have Charlie dealing with Vaggie as an angel, former angel, and that she's been fallen. They literally just ripped off her wings and went. There's that knowledge, as well as the fact that they completely denied that they were going to do anything about it. And I'm going to go back to what they said at the very end about what they were going to plan on doing. Because what did they say there? They were saying that essentially he's like, I win. And what does Adam say? Adam's just the worst. Because he's like, save the date because we're coming to your hotel first. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a couple months. Uh-huh. Yep. And then Emily. We're gonna talk about that. So yeah, so this episode, I do appreciate the pride stickers on Charlie's merchandise, which I know some people will be like, oh well, how do we portray like people in the LGBTQ community? And I'm like, well, some of some extremist religious groups think that, you know, you're going to hell if you're not heterosexual and all of this, so it definitely plays into that. And if you know of any extremist religious groups, they often persecute people who are in LGBTQ communities. So yeah, it seems appropriate that they would have that on there. And I like that they just go through all of this gear and then they bring all those suitcases when they're going to be gone for like one day. It's a funny little trope. I think it's a cute joke. My whole thing with the Vaggie and Charlie thing, my biggest pet peeve with storytelling is the miscommunication trope. And it's done for a reason. I understand that. I'm an English major. I get why they do it in narratives, but it's just so frustrating because it's one of those things where like, we could just solve this with a conversation. and my thing about Vaggie is I'm like, you know how kind-hearted Charlie is. And I know that she doesn't want to tell her because she's killed all of these people, but I'm like, why aren't you talking to her? Because the whole point of the hotel is to reform people who have committed sins. All you have to do is sit down with Charlie and be like, hey, I used to be an angel. I did all of these things. I'm not proud of it, but you've helped show me the light, and this hotel has helped show me the light, and now I've changed my ways. And Charlie would be like, oh, okay. And I have a feeling that's exactly what's going to happen next episode. So when it's something like that, I'm like, you're just drawing this out for no reason. Like, there's no reason to make this a conflict. It's just gonna be resolved like that next episode. So I'm like, why are we wasting our time being like, oh no, is Charlie not going to be open-minded as she's putting her things into a pride stickered suitcase? Come on, show. You were supposed to be for adults. Come on now. That's my one thing about Hazbin Hotel that I've talked about in previous episodes. I think with the Angel Dust episode that I've talked about in the pilot, made it seem like a very adult show. Like this was a very adult show, very dark, very crude humor. And it was and then when you get to this version, it almost seems a little sanitized. And that's so weird to say for this show, but it's sanitized in a way that the themes, in my opinion, are a little bit, I don't want to say the word dumbed down, but they're made a little bit more accessible. And that doesn't seem like a bad thing, but it's almost like we've got to spell it out as loud and clear as we can. And I think it's also from me watching a lot of anime. Anime is a lot more subtle than Western cartoons, and that's just how it is. There's a lot of Western animation I've watched, and it tries to do some adult themes, and I'm like, anime, no offense, anime does it a little bit better. I'm like, anime is a lot more subtle. It's a lot more, you gotta think, you gotta figure it out. There's a lot more symbolism and stuff that's kind of hidden in its meaning. And from Western animation that I've watched, a lot of it is very on the nose and like, we have to come out and say it so you'll understand it. And I'm like, I wish sometimes that some Western shows would treat its audience a little smarter. And I know that that's not all Western animation, so I don't want to say that that's the case. But the stuff that I've watched, I don't watch a lot of it because I'm like, oh, but anime does it better. So I don't know. I feel like this show has sanitized a little bit, and then they put the fuck in there to make it seem like it's not. But I'm like, the whole miscommunication trope, I'm like, it's going to get resolved next episode. It's not even going to be a thing. Charlie's open-minded. She's going to forgive Vaggie. So that whole plot point in this episode almost seemed kind of pointless because I was like, nothing's gonna come of it. If Charlie had issues with it, or that had been set up where Charlie was like, if Charlie had said, oh, I will never forgive anybody that has done these cruel things, then it would be a problem. It'd be like, oh, okay, now we don't want to have this. But they're in hell. She's open-minded, and like, that's her whole point is reformation. So I'm like, that whole plot point, I was like, I don't understand why it's a big deal in this episode because we know it's going to get resolved. And I wish the show would treat us a little bit smarter because of it, but it's fine. Anyway, and they set it up, it's very on the nose where she's like, you have to come. Everything's going to be fine, when we know it's absolutely not, right? So I do think that for me, the most prominent storyline in this series so far is Angel Dust's relationship with Valentino. It's by far the most engaging element of Valentino and Angel Dust standing up to him. I think that's the best plot line so far. And I like the fact of seeing Husker be this friend that helps him along the way, kind of gain more of his agency. I think that that's the most compelling storyline, and which is why I would love to see Angel Dust be one of the persons that is reformed. And that's where I really thought we were going this episode, but nope, it gets shut down pretty quick, which we'll talk about. Nifty is hilarious. I honestly, the idea of Nifty being the drunk that wants to clean up the bar because she's so used to cleaning it up, that's my thing. I like Hazbin Hotel a lot. There's a lot I like about it, and there's just a couple things that I'm like, oh, this is too on the nose. Why are we doing this? Choices, but we'll talk about those. But overall, I do like Hazbin Hotel a lot, and I think this season is cute. It's cute. Have I seen better anime? But I think it's cute. I think it's adorable. And I'm glad that it exists because it does talk about some topics like with Angel Dust that I think deserve to be talked about in a show. And so I'm glad that it does exist because I know a lot of people really like this show and it's really, really good. And I understand why you would like it. But yeah. So I'm glad Cherry Bomb shows up. She has an Australian accent now, as in the pilot she did not, which I am totally fine with the Australian accent. I think it's really funny. As you can tell, I'm wearing a drag queen shirt, so I love RuPaul's Drag Race a lot. And I've not watched I've not watched Australia's Drag Race, but I could totally see a drag queen doing Cherry Bomb. I think that'd be a really cool cosplay. Christina Alabato plays Cherry Bomb. I really like her voice. She has a great voice in there. It sounds so natural. I like it a lot. I just love when Charlie was like, hi, I'm the person that owns this hotel. You just blew a hole in the wall. Like, Charlie can be so passive aggressive. And that's kind of hilarious about her character. She's like, hi, how you doing? And then Cherry Bomb's like, okay, so you're treating us. You're having us go out. And she's like, here you go, Cherry Bomb. Here's some money. Go take them out on the town. She's like, okay, sure. I would have never guessed in 1,000 years that they would have had in this show Sir Pinchas having a crush on Cherry Bomb. That is such a bizarre choice. It's such a bizarre choice because in the pilot they were rivals. They were like, rivals in town and stuff, fighting each other. And I was like, they're so much mismatched. And that's probably part of it, is that Sir Pinchas has to realize that she's not good for him. Like, dude, don't. Because she's the worst for him. I'm like, they have no chemistry. Zero chemistry on screen. I don't know why they've made him have a crush on her, except to just make him seem more and more innocent, which, if so, mission accomplished. But I'm like, they have zero chemistry, and nor do I see them ever developing chemistry, unless somehow maybe he gets reformed and he reforms her and it starts a chain effect. But I don't understand why they made him have a crush on her, because it's a weird plot point. I mean, I get why, and it does lend to some really cute moments with him, but I'm like, they have zero chemistry. I'm like, oh no. And also, I want to just point it out here, when they get to the club and Sir Pinchas, who clearly does not know what he's saying, he's so naive and innocent. I think it is a little bit weird for the show, who just had an entire episode about sexual assault and Angel, have a moment where Sir Pinchas is like, I'm gonna have sex with everyone, but he clearly doesn't mean it, and he clearly just said it in the moment. And then they have him drug away into a closet by people to have sex. I'm like, we just had an episode talking about how that was a bad thing. And then you're going to have a scene like that in this episode? Oof. And I'm sure some people in the comments will be like, but he said he wanted it. That's consent. I'm like, he didn't know what he was saying. He just blurted it out in the moment. That's still not a consensual moment. He didn't know what he was saying. And he was drunk. I was like, oh, show. And they luckily they just dropped it. He just comes out of the closet, everything's fine. And so maybe he got away without being hurt. But they immediately dropped it, which makes me think that as they were animating or as they were going through storyboarding, they're like, maybe this was a bad idea. Let's not carry this any further. And they just drop it and never come back to it. Because in that moment, I was like, oh, I don't find this funny. I feel like you just had a whole episode talking about how bad it was. And now you're having a scene of it and it's supposed to be a joke. ooh, I was like, ooh, that was a choice. I don't know if it's one I would have made, but luckily it's just one scene, but I was just kind of like, show what we doing, especially when we have Valentino in the next scene. And I was like, so yeah. So Charlie's like, everything's fine. We're going to heaven. You all just hang out, have a good time. It's going to be totally okay. I do love the scene where Esther Pinchas is trying to like hit on Cherry Bomb. Her little bubble blowing gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, so they get to heaven, which is sparkling and clean. Everything's great. St. Peter is hilarious. I love the character of St. Peter. What I was going to say is that if you've ever seen the musical Wicked, we always joked in college because there's always that one theater kid. If you've ever been in a play before, and I've been in a couple, but if you've ever been in a play, there's always at least one character in the show that they have like one line or a few lines, and they're not really a major character at all. They're just like in one scene with one little role, and that's all it is. And on paper, it doesn't look like it's much of a big deal. You're just like, oh, okay, here's this one role. You got these two lines. You just go out there and say them, and then your scene is done. But we always joked in college that that person that gets that role is usually the person that gets those roles are people that tried out for the lead and they weren't quite the quality needed for the lead role, or they weren't the right fit. So they put them in this role being like, hey, you're really good and dedicated, but you're not fitting the lead role, so we're going to put you over here. And you just do this one scene. And those people will act the hell out of that one scene and make it the biggest thing in the whole play. And they're usually like a show stealer, a scene stealer. They just make it like it is their life goal to make that scene their bitch. And it's so funny. So in Wicked, if you ever watch that play, we always joke there's this one guy and all he has to do is come out and say, the wizard will see you now. That's like his only line in the whole play. That's his only line. And it comes at the very end of a song. And he's like, the wizard will see you now. But if you've ever watched Wicked, that man will, because it's usually a male character in the play, and he will eat that scene, that line up. He's like, the wizard will see you now, or like something very dramatic. Every rendition of Wicked that I've seen, that line is said in the most extreme, over the top, overacting way, in the best way possible. And that was St. Peter in this episode. He only had this one. He did have a song, which was more than I thought he'd have, but every line that his actor, Darren Criss, every line that he says, every moment he says, he easily stole the show for me in this episode because he was just so delightful. And he's just like, oh, you're not in the book. Oh, you're Lucifer's your dad. Well, are you sure you're in the right place? Just, that's my type of humor. My type of humor is that kind of more subtle, on the nose, dry humor that's just like, oh, are you sure you got, I don't know if you're right. That was more my humor. And so the whole St. Peter incident. And then, of course, they get to the song, which I thought he has a beautiful singing voice. Of course he does. But like sings the hell out of that song. It's so good. So we meet the two seraphims. I was thinking of Seraph of the End the whole time I was watching this scene, who are basically the mouthpiece of heaven, Emily and Sarah, which Sarah means princess. So that she's like, that makes sense. I'm interested that there's only two seraphims in this, which is curious. Like she's the one. I wonder if she's going to be one to replace Sarah, if they're setting that up with her character. I thought that they were mother and daughter. I thought this was going to be like a Charlie is Lucifer's daughter, Emily is Seraphim's daughter, and that was going to be like the two daughters, one daughter from hell, one daughter from heaven, and they just like see each other. And it doesn't seem to be that way because she doesn't call Sarah mom. She just says like, I adored you and I looked up to you. So I thought that was pretty interesting that that's not this case. What's interesting is they go into heaven and everything is just perfectly like spotless and clean. Everybody's just having a great old time. I think the one aspect, I love that everyone is kind of looking more like the biblically accurate angels. Like they don't all look humanoid. They all look kind of like the monsters in hell, sort of. And they're like, but everything is perfect. And they're like, everybody's like there's like alligators and birds and everybody's having like a party. There's like heavenly emojis. This is everywhere Charlie would dream of. Like all of the things are super cute. And they're like, there's the scientist there. We got the brightest. And everyone is hot. That line there where they're all like, all the men in like the skimpy clothes. I'm so fascinated by the fact that they're in like the skimpy clothes, kind of like the demons, only in this version they're considered to be a good thing, which is interesting. I do love when Vaggie gets very upset that Emily's like holding Charlie's hands, because I love the dynamic of Emily and Charlie is super cute. You have like the red and blue, you have the warm colors and the cool colors, the angel and the demon. All of the elements are there. So I could see why Vaggie would be jealous, where she's like, get away. I didn't know if they would like expand on that storyline, but they don't. And so that part's interesting to me. But yeah, St. Peter and Emily doing the little song. It's super cute. I don't know who the angel is that's helping Adam. I don't believe it's Eve, which fascinates me. Adam is an enigma. I think they only let him stay because he's supposedly the first person to go to heaven. But he's just as bad as the demons. The thing that gets me, that I was like, show why we doing this, is that he just curses and is awful the whole time he's in heaven, and they just kind of overlook it, which I guess that's the point. They're all, you know, here's my problem with it, is that there's this weird dichotomy in heaven in this episode where it's like everybody's fine. Everybody's like, oh, this is heaven. We're all supposed to act really good. We don't have alcohol. We don't have anything. It's all perfect, perfect, perfect. And I almost wish that the show would go one of two ways. It almost seems like it wants to have its cake and eat it too. I wish the show would do one of two things with heaven, which is what I was curious about. Either, because I think what should have happened was you should have made heaven spotless. Everyone's perfect. Everyone talks politely. Everyone is absolutely perfect. And if you're going to have the condescension and if you're going to have the condescension and the elitism, that's how you go about it, is being like holier than thou. The whole city should have been holier than thou and been like, welcome to heaven. Like everything's perfect here. And there's like no coffee. There's like nothing that could lead to, because they were at a coffee shop and like coffee is a caffeine, which can be something you're addicted to. That seems like a hell thing. So it's like, it should have been, everything was perfect. Like no caffeine, like everything is perfect. There's no addiction, no nothing. Everything is spotless. And then they use that perfection to transfer into a form of self-righteousness and holier than thou-ness and elitism. And they're like, well, everything's perfect here. And oh, he's dirty and he's this. We can't possibly have anything dirty in heaven. Like, that's what I was waiting for. And that there is no compassion in heaven. It's all just perfection and elitism. And then they just kind of go, and if you're going to do that, have Adam behind closed doors be how we've seen him in hell, where he's like, F that bitch, and like all this. But when he's in front of the other angels, he's like, oh, everyone, we should be like this. Like, I was waiting for that, because that to me is more convincing of why they're not letting people into hell, because they all think they're holier than thou. This tries to make it to where the angels don't know what's going on. They don't know that there's a purge in hell. They didn't know until now, and now they're complicit with it. So, and I know that some people in the comments will be like, well, that's more realistic. I'm like, but this is supposed to be heaven, not the human realm. In humanity, that's how it would be. Everybody's like, oh, well, complicit, no. But in heaven, it would be, I don't know why we have everybody just being like, oh, we didn't know, and we're trying to be compassionate, but now we know. And being like that, but then Adam curses in front of them and is an awful person. And they just said they had all these rules, but they don't look down on him. And I'm like, okay, is it just because he's the first angel? But it's kind of weird, the tone of it. I feel like they could have done so much more with the heaven angle. And like, I feel like the holier than thou quality would have been so much more effective. And then show behind closed doors that they're a lot less, compassionate, and they're a lot less perfect. And in fact, they're the same as the demons. And then that would have been like, oh, okay, now we see what's going on. Because I don't know. And then Emily, I like that Emily's kind of innocent in all this, and she didn't know, and she's like the only one good person. But then like some of the bystanders in the trial, I'm like, well, I don't really feel like they didn't know either. So why should we feel bad for them? It didn't make heaven look as bad as I think it was supposed to, because you have hell represented as it's considered the bad place, but actually it's the all-inclusive place. I wanted heaven to seem like the good place, but it's not inclusive at all. And that's not what this episode gives off. This episode's like, yeah, everybody's included because we don't know any different. And I'm like, oh, that kind of seems like a little wishy-washy. Seems like it could have been, I wanted it to be more extremes to kind of have, because you have humanity supposed to be the gray area, the middle ground. And then you have the heaven and hell dichotomy. And I wanted that dichotomy to be stronger, and it just isn't. It's just basically we're back on Earth. That's what heaven felt like. It's like we're back on Earth. They're just kind of pretentious. Could have been a lot more. Could have been a lot more. And the fact that they didn't know about the execution, I thought they should have held on to that plot point until the very end. And then maybe if Seraphim found out about it, then she could have stopped, and that would have been the climax of the series. But they let the cat out of the bag now, and everybody seems okay with it. So it just felt like, oh, okay, you've told everybody now. We made a song about it. That's all we did. So it was just kind of like, okay, I guess. I feel like Maddie Morphosis when I'm like analyzing this episode. But yeah, just the fact that Adam goes around like being exactly like a demon here. I mean, I guess that's the point, but nobody else in heaven gets away with it or talks about it. So I think the most fascinating thing about heaven right now is that they don't know what the criteria is to get you in heaven or get you into hell. It seems like getting into heaven is a process of luck, is what they make it seem like. Whereas getting into hell is something that is caused by heaven, because they talk about like ripping the wings off. Sarah makes the comment being like, she doesn't want Emily to go down into hell and be like Lucifer and be sent down there. But I'm like, who sends them down there? Where is God in all of this? Where's baby Jesus? Where's all this going on? Like, they're not mentioned at all. It's curious. Very curious. I could see why, but the power structure and everything here. And then I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the plot point of Sarah being like, I had to do it. It was to save our people. I'm like, that's kind of overdone. That's such a cliche plot line, being like, I had to do it to save our people. And I'm like, I've seen that how many times? I've watched too many Marvel movies. I'm like, if the motivation is I had to save our people, I'm like, but why? But what was, and she talks about an uprising. I'm like, well, then show us that. What was that? What was the cause of that? Who led that? Was that Lucifer and Lilith? What was going on? And maybe they'll show us later in the series, and that's what they're building up towards. It was just a little cliche, the whole like, I have to save my people. And I'm like, that's the plot point we're going with. I would have rather it been like a covert thing and it all been Adam's like doing, and Sarah didn't even know about it, than for him to be like, yeah, I'm just going along with whatever we're doing. So yeah, then we have the miscommunication trope with Vaggie and them, and Adam comes in, he's like, I'm going to tell her that you're an angel. And I'm like, and Charlie's going to forgive her in the next episode. I do like the idea that Vaggie had she had the short hair, and then she lets the angel go. She lets the demon go, and that's what causes her to get, taken down, which again, she showed compassion and they punished her for it. So I'm like, okay, all right. Also, the idea that she was supposedly named after vagina. Oh my God, Adam is the worst. The worst. So I'm assuming the one angel that cut out her eye and ripped off her wings is the one that's in the room with Adam and them. Here's my thing about her. They're trying to keep secret that they do executions. The angel's walking around with a blood splatter on her uniform. I'm like, does nobody question that? Does nobody ever wonder, like, why do you have a blood splatter on your uniform in heaven where it's spotless? And she just doesn't say anything? She's like walking around with blood on her uniform. Like, what? I also like that the angel blood is supposedly gold. That's interesting. I thought that the angel wings ripping off in the eye part was gruesome and grisly. It just seemed to happen so fast. They're like, okay, bye. And then that was it. I do love that Charlie like finds her outside the dumpster and like bandages up her face, and then they both like become girlfriends after that. That part's interesting. Also, the fact that the angels, do they all have like the bob, the fuck ass bob? Do they all have that when they start out? I don't know. I do think it's just so bizarre that Adam gets away with everything and nobody questions him at all. Again, I love the biblically accurate angels. I think they're really good. I loved the first song in this. I loved the first song in this episode that was about Welcome to Heaven. It felt very like Wizard of Oz, Emerald City, like One Short Day in the Emerald City. It felt very much like that, which is what made me think of Wicked. And I really liked it. I did not care for the second song, if I'm being totally honest with y'all. It was very like spoken word singing. And I was just like, you could have just made this dialogue. I didn't understand the purpose of that song. It feels like they try to cram 2 songs per episode, which is cool, but I'm like, I wouldn't listen to that song on my day to work or anything, right? It just felt like you could have just had it be dialogue and had more emotion packed into it than just try to make it a song. And some of the lines weren't necessarily lyrics. They were just lines of dialogue that you're singing. So I didn't like that second song at all. I thought it was kind of corny. I was like, the first song made sense because it's like, welcome to the city. We're making it all seem beautiful and fabulous. I feel like in a musical, a song has to have a purpose. It has to have a purpose. Like, what is the emotional venue? Or it needs to be a reprise. What could have happened would be, if you were going to have another song in this episode, have Adam and the one angel sing a song to Vaggie about how they're going to out her as an angel and set that up. And then have a reprise where at the very end of the episode, they like do kind of like, it would be kind of like Tangled, where Mother Gothel is having like the song Mother Knows Best. And so she sings Mother Knows Best to Rapunzel. And then towards like the end of the second act, right before we're going to go in the third act, where things are like dark and gloomy, and she's trying to reveal, she's like, that's how fast he'll leave you, and like all that. Like they could have done a reprise where Adam starts to tell Charlie about Vaggie and all the things she's done, and then Vaggie's like, no. And they kind of do that in this, but it's attached to this other song by Sarah that I'm like, I don't care about that song. It's just her singing dialogue. They could have just done a reprise and then outed Vaggie as a former angel, and then that could have been like, it would have also reminded me of Prince Ali, where Jafar, right before he sends Aladdin out into the winter tundra in the little tower, he's like, Princess, say goodbye to Prince Ali, and it could have been like a big number and crescendo and all that. As I'm saying this, I realize I'm criticizing the episode that hundreds of people worked on. But I just think it could have been better. And I wish, I just was like, I expected more. And I was a little bit let down by the heaven scenes, other than that opening number. A wee bit. Now, the scene in the club, that scene is great. Other than the weird, serpentious, like, we're gonna make him have sex scene. That part was weird, and I did not like that at all. But I did like the whole bar scene. I like that we cut back to the neon lights and everything. I do like this message of, Angel Dust is slowly changing, and he's slowly being influenced by Charlie in the hotel, but also Husker being like a good friend and being like, hey, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. And so at first, Angel Dust gives in, but then his more compassionate side, which I think has always been there all along, the hotel's just helped make that more apparent. He sees Nifty, she got way too drunk, and I like when he's like, she's like 2 pounds. It goes right through her. And he sees her like getting out of hand. And so he goes to like help her. Like, I really liked that part. I liked that an awful lot. I also liked that, despite all the grief that Cherry Bomb gives him, she's surprisingly nice about everything at the end. Cherry Bomb was like, hey, whatever, you do whatever you want, I'm gonna do whatever. She doesn't necessarily make fun of him as much as she could have. She just kind of was like, well, fine, your loss and all that. And I do appreciate that. I think at the end of the day, her and Husker are good friends to Angel Dust. So yeah. And then they point out, I feel like with Heaven, they had the 3 things that were required to go into heaven: being selfless and spending for somebody else. And what was the other one? There was like, being selfless, helping someone else, and sticking it to the man. Again, I would have loved if they were like, well, what does it take to get into heaven? And they just pulled out this like giant scroll and went like this, and it just went, and they're like, here's all the things that you have to do to get into heaven. And Charlie's like, oh, well, we've got work to do. And then it would come out, there's like an abridged version or something like that, or something. And again, I thought it would have been more effective if behind closed doors, Adam is awful, but in front of Sarah and the others, he's like, I'm actually perfect, and I've done all these things. Like, I thought that would be much more effective, but Because that's kind of the thing. Groups like that are extremist, they pose themselves as perfect and as just and self-righteous, and we're doing all of these good things and we're good Christians, and then behind closed doors they're spouting hateful rhetoric and doing things that are awful and taking actions against other groups that are bad. And I think that could have been reflected better in this episode, but that's just my opinion. So yeah, so then we have the confrontation with Valentino and Angel Dust, and I thought that was really, really good. I like the Angel Dust. I love the idea that Angel Dust is like, when I'm on the clock with you, yeah, I agreed to do whatever, but when I'm off duty, I get to do whatever I want. Like, I like Angel Dust sticking up for himself. That part was really cute, and I liked Husker and her, like, and Cherry Bomb kind of walking off with him, which was nice. Anyway, so I like that Adam's like, well, why isn't he here then? And everybody's like, why isn't he here? I think the most interesting part about heaven for me right now is that nobody knows why people get sent to heaven and why they don't. She's like, we know when they pass divine judgment, it's our job to ensure, yeah, don't steal, act selfless, stick it to the man, that these souls are safe. I feel like there should be more to that list than just 3 things, but it seemed like it was very watered down for the sake of let's fit this in one episode. So, and then they have the song, which again, I'm just not a fan of the song. A lot of it's just dialogue that could be spoken instead of sung, and I think would have maybe been more effective if that was it. And then you could have came in with Adam, and also the thing where Adam was like, he was not supposed to, and my dogs, hey guys, stop. The thing where Adam was not supposed to talk about the extermination, and then he just lets it out, which he's the worst, so are we surprised? But that whole part just seemed kind of shoehorned in, and they just immediately put it to a song, and I'm like, yeah, it just feels like a song that you would never listen to out of context in real life. It just feels like a song for the sake of being a song for this episode to keep the plot going. I do like Sarah, and I do like Emily and Charlie standing next to each other. That part is really, really cool. I like the red and blue next to one another. But again, and then Charlie being like, I was trolled not to trust in angels. And then Vaggie's like, oh, by her, by Vaggie. And then, you know. But here's the thing, and that's the thing too, is that Vaggie told her not to trust angels. It could have been more impactful if her dad or someone had told her that, being like, oh, don't trust angels, they'll betray you. But by Vaggie telling her that, I don't know. I feel like next episode, they're going to have a 5-minute conversation and everything's going to be fine, which will make the conflict of this episode completely pointless. So it's not going to be something that's going to continue on into season 2, I don't think. So the only thing interesting about Adam's behavior in this is that he does say sorry to Sarah. He does seem like he genuinely is like, oh, sorry about that. I love Sarah's hair, like, becoming like the eyeballs. I thought that part was really, really cool. I liked that a lot. And then, but I just wanted more with Emily and Sarah, more setup of their characters. And it seems like maybe they're going to be around for multiple episodes. I don't know. Interesting. Don't get me wrong. I feel like I've bitched the entire time about this episode. I liked this episode fine. The parts with Angel Dust and the club were definitely my favorites. And the stuff with Cherry Bomb was my favorite too. When we had in the pilot the thing about heaven being explained at the beginning, it's one of those things where you have all these expectations going into the series about heaven, and I've not watched all of Hell of a Boss. I've only watched like half of season 1 of Hell of a Boss, so even then they were starting to preface heaven a little bit, and you just get these expectations because usually when they handle heaven in a show, it goes a certain way. And this doesn't seem, my whole thing with the heaven in this series is it doesn't seem to have a definitive voice. With hell, it's crude, it's violent, it's crude, there's sex, there's drugs, there's rock and roll. It is a very distinct voice, and you know what you're getting into when you go into hell. You know the storyline, the characters, all of that. There is not a distinct voice in heaven in this series. On the one hand, it feels like it's trying to eat its cake and have it too. It feels like it's trying to be the pristine, clean, polished, perfect. But then they're like, oh, but the angels are also kind of relatable and, compassionate and stuff. But then some of them aren't. I'm like, you got to make it, you got to have a precise voice, especially for an area like heaven that you've built up. And it just feels like, it feels like the real world. It feels like Earth is all it feels like. It feels like Earth, but we're calling it heaven. And I want it to be cranked up to a 12, and it's just sitting on an 8. And I'm like, how is that different than our world? I don't know. But I don't know if we're going back to heaven the next 2 episodes, so I am surprised we didn't see Lilith. I thought Lilith was going to be in the role of Sarah in this episode. I thought Lilith would have been having an affair with Adam from Lucifer, and that's why Lucifer doesn't want to talk to Adam. I thought that was going to be going on, but that does not seem to be the case, so I don't know where Lilith is. We'll see, I guess. But I am excited to see what happens next week in episodes 7 and 8. I do like this show. I just, from watching all the anime that I have and seeing some very high quality anime, it does make me a little bit more critical of shows. And so that's why I'm kind of like, oh, I wish it was like this. But I like Hazbin Hotel overall, so we'll see what happens. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with the penultimate episode of season 1 of Hazbin Hotel. Bye!